As we prepare to transition into freedoms and deregulation, I don't think it would be particularly upsetting to say that government also needs its claws out from everyone's cookie jars in terms of personal barricades and restrictions to open up opportunity. It's fairly well understood that in order to do anything personally productive today, whether it's changes to your property or starting a simple lemonade stand, you need a permit and government approval for every step. In order to understand why that is first, the simple reality is that our government is in so much debt that we need to generate as much revenue as possible from our citizens, rather than address the issues at hand. We create all these fines and fees and we come up with all these new taxes, and they just get passed off to everyday citizens. We are stuck with this issue of solving a debt, but punishing the citizens and expecting them to fix the problem that they never caused. The reason we are in so much debt to begin with is because of fractionalized banking and the central banks in Europe that spread to America. Andrew Jackson was the only US president to settle the national debt because he dissolved the Second National Bank in 1816, which was set up by James Madison, and he decided to go to war with central banking. The Second National Bank was financed by John Jacobs Astor, David Parrish, Stephen Girard, and Jacob Barker. The Astor family was one of the wealthiest families in American history in the 19th century before losing prominence. David Parrish committed suicide on account of fraud and controversial loans made to the Austrian emperor, which was directly against US policy at the time. However, Stephen Girard is who mattered the most. Girard was a French banker with close Jewish influence. I mention this not with anti-Semitic connotation, but rather as a relevant fact of history. Girard's fortune was a result of trade with China and opium sales. When the First National Bank was dissolved, Girard bought the majority of its stock and privatized it under its own name. As a result of this, Girard became the main source of aid to fund the War of 1812. He offered the majority of his own assets as security, effectively putting the entire nation in debt to one man. After the war, Girard's bank became Madison's Second National Bank that Andrew Jackson had abolished on account of Jackson's view that they consolidated power to elites and wealthy businessmen. In fact, the premise behind the bank, stated by its founders, was to stabilize currency and protect their business assets. Jackson, unsurprisingly, was then the target of an assassination attempt. I assume I will be too. Since then, it has been a financial war to remove the gold standard and consolidate the wealth to a few individuals with special interests, and 2008 showed us a prime example of why this system is not only bound for failure, but designed for it to benefit its masters. The banks were giving out mortgages like candy and playing hot potato while compiling the debt and collecting interest. This resulted in long-term risks far outpacing their real-time assets and resulted in the floor collapsing out from under them when the heat got too hot. The issue was that the banks had mitigated their own risk, despite the irresponsibility, by passing the debts amongst each other, while the individual and business owner bore the full burden. This allowed the banks the opportunity to capitalize and consolidate property and ownership in the hopes of monopolizing the market. The other aspect that compounds our debt is our market creates pure competition, and if you don't get ahead, you'll be walked on. When an animal is in distress and feels cornered, they have two options: fight or flight. When constantly subjected to a state of fight, it becomes the new norm. Peace is no longer desirable because it's seen as insufficient, boring, and you constantly feel like you're falling behind. Yet, how long can a fire stay burning? I suppose as long as its keeper is able to sustain it. Are you then God or man? Or even God had rested and commanded it of us. A bodybuilder understands their muscles need rest to develop and recover. A parent knows a child will never run until learning to walk. Yet economists don't seem to understand a market needs decompression in order to balance and be sustainable for all, not a lottery for some. Central banks and fractionalized banking has made this rate of growth and production possible at a constant rate with no opportunity for decompression and stability by providing businesses and individuals with a constant cycle of invisible money through credit cards, student loans, business loans, auto loans, mortgages that they themselves don't have in full because they mutually share funds amongst each other to cover their shortages. They then sell our debt as securities and charge interest on those payments as well. It's just like as they did in '08, as if they never learned their lesson, or are simply repeating the cycle on purpose for consolidation and monopolization again. How's our market doing right now? This captures the individual in an immediate cycle of debt, especially students, that forces them to step on anyone in their way of paying it back, take and maintain whatever job will hire them, and sacrifice their true potential while generating pure profit for the bank and allowing them to sell our debt for more gains. The higher the national consumer debt, the more leverage and interest they have access to. The goal is always climb higher and higher and jump ship before the risk of defaulting becomes too great to bear. Yet the consumer and individual are who bear the burden. With no time to establish new foundations of support, you simply set yourself up for a crash. That's why it seems almost designed for that purpose. COVID's impact on the market and the manipulation to keep it alive that happened after prolonged a ticking time bomb that is ready to explode and take our entire country with it this time. We can blame high inflation on Biden, yet it was the decisions under Trump's term that created it. Conveniently, it will pave the way for a new financial system revolving around digital currencies to track the IP and location of every single transaction around the world. This new financial system will give banks ultimate control and access to every individual's finances and their history. It would allow the freezing and suspension of accounts by tyrannical rule based on if you fall out of line. Have we truly thought about the implication of this? Have we truly asked ourselves who this man is loyal to? The issue becomes about regulating the market's playing field, ensuring fairness to consumer to producer and producer to producer, and limiting the power and influence of banks. An emphasis, however, must be put on deregulating personal freedoms and securing risk of abuse. The argument has been made for regulation in terms of economic equality, so let's turn to the argument to provide maximum personal freedom without the barricades of government.